Welcome to IT in Motion, where we make autonomous IT entertaining and informative. My name is Sanjog.
And I'm Josh. We're your hosts. Today we're talking to Priyanka Kharat, who is the Vice President of Product and Engineering here at ScienceLogic. Everybody give it up for Priyanka!
Welcome to the show, Priyanka.
Priyanka, you brought out a big crowd today.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be part of this amazing podcast because I'm myself, am an avid subscriber of your work.
That's awesome.
We got one.
So Priyanka, tell us about yourself briefly.
So I'm VP of Product Engineering in ScienceLogic. My organization spans across all the applications, dashboards, and AI ML-driven insights that you see on ScienceLogic platform. So a lot of exciting work, and I get to work with amazing people.
Yeah, excellent. Well,
Super cool.
Thanks for coming out today. We wanted to start off today with a little bit of an icebreaker game. So what we're going to do is a game we like to call This or That. And we're going to ask you a question, and you tell us which you prefer. So we'll start with the first question. Would you prefer to read an adventure book or a nonfiction book?
Most probably I'll go for a nonfiction because, unless it's a nonfiction adventurous book. But, oftentimes life throws a lot of curveballs at you. And so you would want to get out of the reality and float into the mysterious world, so to speak. But it's if I have to read and I have to just recoil once in a while, it's a nonfiction book.
All right.
Yeah, I've definitely done that with Harry Potter. Would you rather go on vacation in a city or a rural area?
That's an interesting one. It depends on whom I'm traveling with. If it's my kids, it has to be city because you got to make sure they have enough, places to get entertained. But yeah, if it's myself and just my friends, it's rural.
Yeah, get out into nature. Would you rather explore a hot place or a cold place? So
basically, kind of
Hawaii or Alaska?
Oh, okay. Now you make it real. Yeah. It's going to be Hawaii for sure. Not after the fires that broke last few weeks back, but it's always going to be a tropical, warmer place, just where, you feel like you have things under control. So, cold is something I think I can easily lose myself. But yeah.
Awesome. What about Bollywood or Hollywood?
That's an interesting one. It's actually going to be a mix of the two. I really like a new, batch of Bollywood stars that
Ranveer Singh,
exactly.
Alia Bhatt.
Yes,
Yeah.
Priyanka Chopra.
Priyanka Chopra, of course.
It's just that interesting, twist of different cultures, and that gives a spice to it. But still, the setting is Hollywood, right?
Yeah. Have you watched Rocky and Ronnie yet?
I did.
It's a really good movie.
Oh yeah, it is a nice movie. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very, very transformational in terms of how to look at families and society at large.
In modern day, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Would you rather learn a concept or a skill?
That's a great question, Josh. Concepts are good because they ground you in the basics. They're good to guide you through implementation, but skills are important when it comes to at least bootstrap something on top of a concept. So unfortunately, the answer is going to be both in this case.
Yeah, it's hard to get along with just one, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. For me personally, I almost feel like you gain the concept as you do. So like learning the skill set, it really cements that concept. But everything starts with a concept.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. I mean, when you're actually, through the skill, navigating yourself, you go back and, revisit concepts. So I think, it's you can do with one.
Yeah, I think if you've ever done any teaching, right, there are different kinds of learners, and some people, if they don't understand the conceptual framework, the theoretical, the skills seem irrelevant and pointless, or they're difficult to understand. There are other people who just want to learn the concrete thing, and then they develop the
understanding
conceptual understanding from that.
Right.
So it may be a little bit of just how your mind works.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah. No.
Absolutely.
It's true.
So would you rather learn a technical skill or a leadership skill?
That's a very interesting question, and it also depends on at what phase of your career you are.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes people like to gravitate towards technical skills. That looks good on your resume, right? I mean, people can understand the tactical aspect of it, but oftentimes you have to deal with people. It's a people's business after all. So if I were to really go and hone in making my impact across a particular organization, I would definitely read up and start thinking about leadership skills. But it's a new domain, and obviously I need to rally my team around a new area like LLMs or generative AI. Then obviously it's going to be technical skill.
Yeah, you gotta have some technical relevancy if you're going to lead a technical organization.
Of course.
Well, so speaking of technical skills, leadership skills, and that kind of relevancy, tell us a little bit about your career path.
Of course. I mean, I think we all live in one of the best eras of revolution, information revolution. Some people call it Industrial Revolution 4.0. Whatever it is, I think the pace at which all our careers have transformed in the last 20 years has been staggering. If you talk to our parents or our grandparents, they haven't seen shifts happening at such a cadence, and it just it's mind-boggling. And I think my career has been really punctuated by those amazing technological shifts. So I started my career after graduating from USC. I got my master's in computer science there in a company called Qualcomm. Many of you know that it is a Snapdragon-based mobile processor company. But I joined the company when they were just starting to start an engagement with Google. And so I was part of this alpha team that got to work with Google's smart engineers, and we were essentially building a first set of multimedia and smart phone applications. So it really started from, how do we take something that is, long-term running like a server and mobile application and really make it fun, right? Sure. That's where the smartphone started. And so kind of that took me into my next company, Intel, where the portfolio increased, and it was not just, mobile phones, but it, extended into much bigger solutions like data centers and IoT and autonomous cars. And there the focus was like, hey, whatever you build, can it scale across multiple form factors? Because as a company, Intel would not really have bespoke solutions because it's really just not a very good use of R&D budget, right?
Right.
So that again, went into a lot of leadership roles, deals with a lot of automobile companies, and I learned a lot there. But somewhere along that pathway, I felt like I was still very far away from the end customer. When you're in a big company, you don't get to meet customers because there are multiple layers of suppliers that take your solution to the actual customer. Anyways, that's when I decided to go into healthcare because AI/ML, which I had unknowingly implemented in Intel, was becoming a big center point for a health system that I decided to eventually join. And they were basically looking for building predictive systems that can predict, adverse conditions in patients and operational efficiencies in a healthcare. So anyways, it was an amazing ride where I got to build cloud-first strategy, commercialize solutions that would eventually determine mortality of a trauma patient or complication due to sepsis. I know these are all medical terms, but the net was, hey, how can you build a predictive system that can start telling care providers whether their patients are going to need intervention. Are they running into
Start
risk?
the intervention earlier,
exactly.
so that they get better treatments.
And so it was a wonderful ride. Learned a lot, and just along the way, as commercialization became an interesting part of my career, thought maybe it's time to come back to core products, which obviously ScienceLogic is a big part of that journey. And then in ScienceLogic, as you guys know, I'm part of this amazing team. Our charter is to build easy to use, navigate, intelligent interfaces. So whether it's your API or whether it's a dashboard, or who knows, in the future we might get into this immersive interface through prompt engineering or essentially dialogue with your IT systems. So the journey continues. It's just different customer base and different verticals. However, the motive is always one, that is, let's solve the real problems for our user base.
So, you've talked about how automation at Intel kind of morphed into AI ML.
Yeah.
What does that mean? How did it happen?
Yeah, it's very it's a great question, Sun, because we as engineers, we don't want to do the same things again and again, right? I mean, sometimes people say engineers are lazy, and I really like that, because when you're lazy, you come up with innovative ways to do things faster, right?
Doing the hard work, yeah.
And so a lot of it at Intel, what we did was building algorithms that would essentially do pattern recognition or audio recognition. We had engagements with big companies like Dolby and Western Digital and others, right? And so the idea there was that, hey, how can we build something that gets replicated faster and also doesn't cause the company a lot of expense in operationalizing? So that's where the root was, that can we be smart in automation? You don't want to just repeat things and spend cycles of your CPU and memory doing the same thing again, because although it's automation doesn't mean that it has to be repeated 1,000 times.
Right.
So that's where a lot of pattern recognition and things like, hey, setting of a smartphone, for example, should I use a software encoder or should I use a hardware encoder? Should I go to the cloud and maybe use a cloud service, things like that? And so that's where a lot of AI ML, pattern recognition, as well as using statistical modeling to ensure that you're not automating in a wrong way. And then once the results would come out, then we would basically smartly use resources to essentially end-to-end get automation done. So it's kind of interviewed, and I think we are now at the peak of AI ML, where we can use it much more smartly.
Yeah. So in the sort of technological realm, it's a lot about driving efficiency, really, right? Like finding ways to eliminate work, to more intelligently use the resources you have, whether they're human resources or they're machine resources, like CPUs, GPUs, TPUs, all these different processing units. But healthcare has its own sort of transformational goals. You were talking about that a little bit earlier. Can you break that down a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, you take me back to my time working for this health system based in Dallas, and to your point, there's lot many operational goals in running a hospital than running an enterprise. Also, in healthcare, one has to understand that there is a lot of security, compliance, privacy aspect to running a business, because you can't put your patient information on the cloud, right? Mm-hmm. So there was that very interesting element of security, compliance that just came as second nature. But there were also, trying to understand how would your end customer interface with your software. So, you build a dashboard, you put that dashboard in front of an administrator, and he or she would love to see density so that they are much more equipped. But if you put the same thing in front of a doctor, they're going to get confused and they will wonder what all this is, and it's waste of their time, right? So there was this balance that had to happen, independent of how powerful your AI ML system is. How does it actually interact with end customer? And that's where I think a lot of work was done in my team. We actually, at the time, hired a design studio from San Francisco that actually helped build a lot of Meta, Facebook at the time, their interfaces. So we really went and understood, how can our end user use an interface like that, and while doing that, making sure that the business leaders had their KPIs as well fulfilled. So, user and your end user is oftentimes different than your buyer or your business owner, right? So that was an interesting dynamic.
And speaking of interfaces in general and the different types of users, you've worked with two different groups. You've built user interfaces for doctors and you've built it for programmers.
Yes.
What are the differences between the two, and their usability, what they expect from it?
It's same and different. I'll tell you how it is same. The thing is, developers, they want to make sure that they have information at their fingertips. They don't really like to move 3-4 screens to get to their information.
Put everything in one single pane.
It's better,
They don't want to break their concentration.
Exactly, and the context switch part. And same with doctors. I mean, if you are a surgeon trying to determine if this patient needs to be wheeled into an operation theater, and this patient is a burn victim, there are a lot of bad things that happen to people around you, and now you're making a decision, split of a second, should I get this patient into an operation theater? Because oftentimes, not taking the patient into operation theater is actually better for them than doing it, although, the vitals could be saying something else. And at that time, they cannot look at 120, 150 vitals in one screenshot and make a decision, but they also want to understand which of those are interesting. And that's where AI/ML came handy, because it could categorize those vitals and put a score, so to speak. And that score had to be with confidence level, because AI/ML models are never 100% right. So the point is, you want to give enough information so that you don't overwhelm the physicians and doctors, nurses. But at the same time, you also want to be cognizant of the fact that these people are making split-second decision. So it's interesting, because you just have to understand the workflow. You want to know what would they be doing before coming to your screen, and what would they eventually do after exiting from your screen. And so there's a lot of that human computer understanding, so to speak, right?
Sure. Yeah, human computer interaction. And I understand it in like the medical setting, it even comes down to the colors that,
oh yes,
they have strong preferences, right? I heard somewhere, read somewhere that surgeons wear blue, so that they have a break from looking at all the kind of red stuff that they see in surgery, so they can see bleeding better. And that, the background of most hospital equipment is black. And so there's an expectation that they're not going to have these really bright white interfaces that you might see elsewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's also, you have to understand they're wearing, cloaks. If it's a surgery setting, they cannot click much. Their hands are probably gloved up. So there are a lot of things. And again, all that just tells you have to understand your user.
Yeah, spot on.
And there, of course, are differences with interfaces for general consumers as well. What's the difference there?
So general consumer is basically, Josh, you and me, when we are interacting on a phone app, right? That is also interesting because it changes with demographics. Like if it's my grandmother, I might want to define, design, develop something different versus if it's my daughter, right?
Right.
It's just it also depends on who your customer user is in terms of their age and what they are seeking. But in general, I would say, and we all know that, right? When we build interfaces at ScienceLogic, we like to keep it as simple as possible, so that people can get to their information quickly. And if there is any drill down that needs to happen, then there is a path that is, intuitive. It's like you don't have to kind of, go around. It's not a treasure hunt.
And the intuitiveness levels change among these different users, even within our product, right?
Yeah.
It's not every engineer is necessarily, there's the one that started yesterday and there's one that's been using it for 15 years, right?
And their level of, experience with the product, just their skill set in the domain.
Yeah, absolutely. Domain expertise means a whole lot when looking at this sort of thing, because if, say in the medical setting, right?
Yeah.
If you're an orderly, you don't have a lot of medical training.
Correct.
A lot of the information on the screen may mean nothing to you. Whereas if you're a doctor and you've gone through residency, you've had 10 to 15 years of training plus, years of experience in interacting. A lot of these things are very short names, very terse, and the details are very relevant to you. So it's that level of experience and domain expertise is incredibly important.
It's very important, yeah. And also one thing is that, what's the attention span? Doctors actually have very high attention span, but is it worth, using that on the information, or they should be actually hands-on on the patient, right? I mean, that's also important.
Yep, absolutely. When it comes to interfaces, there's changes in fashion and then there's changes in usability. What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And a lot of it is also driven by what is happening in the consumer electronics world. And again, I say that all the time because, we are more on our phones than on any productivity software, right? And how these products defined experiences is somewhere psychologically set up in your mind that's how I would like to interact with, let's say, this productivity software, right? So a lot of it is, dependent on that. And so we see that, whether it's Facebook or Google, a lot of the look and feel aspects and new models, even if you say style sheet, they come from these leading consumer, companies, software companies. So that drives a lot. But then at the same time, you have to understand what is the intention of, interfacing with your software. Are they coming there because it's a touch point in a bigger workflow, or is it going to be their, home, right? Yeah. Is this where they, stay all 8 hours of their work, right? So I think both these, things will matter a lot. And over time, you want to give them a same experience that they have with consumer, products. Because nobody likes to be in two different worlds, right? We know that. For example, to your point, if somebody is used to Windows 95, for some time when they come into the latest version, they are not going to like it.
Yeah.
Right? But it's something that, a choice that as a software vendor we have to make, because there is support to be lend to that new versus old version of a software.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think there's a reason that car analogy keeps coming up in the technology world. It's because it's another consumer product that is a technical product with a technical function that also has fashion drive it, right?
Yeah.
Around the year 2000, every car was silver because it looked like rocket ships from the future, right?
Yeah.
That was the idea. And if you go back to the 70s, right, every car was made of 3 boxes, right?
Yeah.
They're square.
Yeah, the fads.
And so you've got sort of these fashions that flow through, and you see that, right, in car design and colors and that sort of thing. And then you have what you'd call usability improvements, functional improvements, right? So at some point we figured out steering wheels are a pretty good way to deal with cars. The pedals have standardized, long before any of us were born.
Right.
But then there's other things like airbags and defrosters. Rear window defrosters, at least in my lifetime, went from some cars having them to all cars having them.
Oh my God, for sure. Like back camera, right?
Yeah, backup camera is a great example.
It was an optional, but now it is important because now it ties into a lot of other sensors, right?
Yeah.
It builds you, much more sensory mesh of networks. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, a lot of these, consumer-based interfaces matter a lot. So movies is a good example.
Yeah. So I guess that's the question, right? Thinking about cars, there's the fashion side of it, right? Is every car silver or magenta? Is that the color this year, right? And the same thing happens with user interfaces, right? There's times where everything is dark, right? Dark mode kind of swept through the industry in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Before that, everything was white. Probably largely driven by the display technologies that were common on cell phones.
Yeah.
How important do you think it is to sort of chase those fashions versus, kind of keep your product the same so that your customers are familiar with it?
It's a very tricky question. I'm sure you guys have come up with a lot of tricky questions.
Have we stumped you yet?
I've been I've been, chugging along, I think.
You definitely are. You definitely are.
You're doing a great job.
So, it's, look, I mean, I have to tell you, it all depends on how much value your software is going to give at the end of the day, right? And there are few things customers can live with. Maybe they want to have a dark mode, and for whatever reason, our software cannot give them dark mode. Unless it's functionally going to limit visibility, and let's say they are in a dark room,
or if it's not 508 compliance or
exactly.
something.
Then yes, you are really creating barriers to the value. But if you're not creating barriers to the value, which is if the user goes into that dashboard, they are able to forecast, they're able to impact business outcomes.
They can still get their job
done. Can get their job done. So there's a balance that has to be, struck. But at the same time, you also don't want to become annoying. Like, if let's say there's a color that is so annoying, it just, feels like, oh God, why am I seeing? So yeah, I mean, and that comes down to prioritization. As a product, where should you prioritize? And we all have,
we all have more work than time.
Exactly. And finite resources. So yeah.
Yeah, and of course, 508 compliance that you brought up, that's the compliance with the law mandating handicap accessibility, right? So that color blindness, captioning on images and things like that, which is of course important to be able to support a broad user base.
Absolutely. Yeah, part of this also is, some people stick to older versions just because they have the usability or the themes or different fashions that they prefer, right? And that adoption of getting them to the newer version sometimes is difficult because they don't prefer to, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever had to overcome that? How do you get over that? I feel like I've just seen that happen so many times. Even I do that myself. I'm like, I don't really like this old version of the new iPhone. I shouldn't have updated it last night.
Well, the classic example is, Gmail, right? Yeah. We've been using Gmail 2005, maybe, I don't know.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Somewhere around the line, right? I remember people used to get linked to try this thing out, and, you're like beta user. By the way, that is also very clever idea of, getting users to feel like they are part of an elite group, right?
Yeah. They influence the product.
In the case of Gmail, it was almost entirely accidental.
Yeah.
It was a side project. They had a bunch of old Pentium 3 servers, and they had very limited capacity.
Yeah.
And so they said, we can't release this to the world. We need to limit it. And it became this viral marketing thing where your friend would get an invite.
Yeah.
Hey, can you send me an invite?
Yeah.
Are you a good enough friend to get the invite?
Exclusiveness. Yeah. They really.
Exactly. It's kind of like you want to be part of that club. But I remember Google went through a facelift probably a couple of years back, and there was this option where it said, hey, this what you are in is going to be called Classic, and then you can go to the new one. Now, I tried my best to stay in Classic because I was so used to it. But then they would basically nudge you to go and try something. Like, for example, if there was a feature like filtering or whatever, they would say, hey, this feature is much better, much easier to try in the newer version. And then, so to answer your question, it is very tough, but you have to keep it time bound, and you have to make sure it's worth for the customer to move into. And so a lot of we are in the engineering organization. We know that all the new investment need to happen on the newer side. So that's also kind of that, that desired state, so to speak, that you show, hey, look, this is great, but if you get to this, look, it unlocks so many other functionalities. So it's tough, users are not going to like it. It just distraction for them. But we have to be persistent because there are good reasons why we want them to switch.
And at some point, you'll just have to be not giving them the option, and this is the only thing that you can do.
Yeah.
iPhone does that to us all the time.
Oh,
it feels like every 2 years I have to get a new phone charger of sorts.
Yeah.
Right, or can't use my headphone jack or whatever the case may be, and that's just what it is if you want to use that product.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and so interfaces are of course going to continue to evolve, whether it's hardware or physical. The new thing, you brought it up at the beginning of our conversation, was generative AI, large language models.
Yeah.
What's your prediction of where things are going with those?
So there's definitely some hype around it. However, there there are a lot of things that this new revolution of AI is going to solve for us, right? The first and the most important thing is the way generative AI technology works is it self-learns a lot of things, and the output is no longer a binary or a very fixed set of output as our predictive algorithms used to give us. It's going to be much more user friendly. Sure. So it's a natural language processing. Right. So you get an output that can very well get translated into human based workflow, and so that is where most promise is, because that was the problem, by the way, we've been solving since 1950s, when first time Alan Turing decided that, hey, can machines think? I mean, he decided first, and then he went out there and presented. Obviously, since then, understanding language has been one aspect of machine learning. And for some time, that aspect didn't get much traction, and it was more the other part, which was machine learning and unsupervised learning, clustering, and all that good stuff. But I think to make AI ML part of each and every system, we needed this boost. And so there's a lot of promise in terms of how quickly it can be applicable. But when I say hype, the hype is really operationalizing AI ML, right? Has always been challenging. And this large language models are actually huge. If you look at the latest numbers, it's like 540 billion parameters.
Yeah, it's crazy large.
And it's still growing, right? So think about the training aspect of such a huge model. And yes, it has gone much, it has become much more effective due to the new technology called transformers and bidirectional transformers. But the point is, how do you, first of all, train what compute? And if you don't train it, you're using pre-trained model. Right. That's where things can get tricky, because when you have a pre-trained model, you're just trying to adjust it, tune it, as they call, for your use case. And there are times it may not always match, right? So we'll have to wait and watch. That doesn't mean that we should, as a technology community, not, try and venture into this world. But, things like hallucination, biases, these are side effects of LLMs, and we should, as a community, be aware of those.
Absolutely. And so, specifically for the IT operations space, how will LLM kind of influence or change or transform that space in general, maybe through the journey of AI ops or anything aside from that?
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, AI ML has been part and parcel of our IT transformation, right? It came as statistical modeling, then it came as forecasting, prediction. We've seen flavors of that. This is going to tie all those models into an interface, a service that you and I can interact with and actually base our workflows on. So definitely it ties everything together. And a big part of our mission at ScienceLogic is to build service-centric interfaces where you don't want our operators and users to go always at the very end of the stack and look at devices and then start folding, uncovering problems at that level versus, how can we influence businesses? So, the power of generative AI is that it can get information from different aspects of your life cycle. It's not just, the operational piece, but also business side, customer success, maybe even sales motion if you are an MSP that is trying to build a better onboarding portfolio.
Right.
So that's where the knowledge is. It's going to be much higher level experience that a company will start getting once it integrates all aspects of its business into this huge machine learning interface, so to speak.
I mean, it's going to be great because it'll kind of break the silos between these different departments as well, bring that single pane of glass for us to kind of work towards alignment in one single goal as a company.
Correct.
Which we're working as one company for a single mission, right?
Yeah, and it impacts, it has been impacting, just not being in awareness of what is the sales motion going on and what am I building versus what is the support for a particular product, right? So I think, talking about AI ops, it's an extension and also abstraction even higher than it.
Yeah. Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, I think the sort of through line for what you've been talking about, really the whole conversation is about surfacing the right information to the right person when they need it so they can make the right decision. And that's a really empowering message.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Priyanka, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. We really appreciate this. And if our guests were ever curious, how to get in contact with you, where they can learn a little bit more about you, where can they go?
Well, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's just an amazing network of like-minded people. So yeah, please reach out through LinkedIn. If anybody reaches out to you directly, I would love to know and interact as well.
Absolutely.
Right. Thanks for joining us today.
Everybody give it up for Priyanka.
Thanks, Priyanka.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you've enjoyed this week's podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We're hosted on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many other podcast platforms. We release episodes regularly, and you can watch all of our episodes at ScienceLogic.com/podcasts.